School District Board of Directors are being recorded and live streamed for the purpose of transparency and increased public access. The live stream, along with recordings from previously held meetings, can be found on the school board YouTube channel. Move on to item 3, budget and finance. Item 3.01, bond refinancing. Mr. Longwell.
Thank you, Mr. Up. Dr. Bitts and I would like to introduce Mr. Remick and his colleague as representatives of Public Financial Management. You guys can come on forward if you'd like. I know Mr. Remick is a familiar face as he's helped support our financing plan through the years. And as we continually look at our outstanding debt, it's not just the debt we've issued, but it's also monitoring the debt that's outstanding to say, are there ever any refunding opportunities or refinancing opportunities? It's kind of like your mortgage. There's times where maybe I can get a more advantageous rate and save some money. And so that is the case with one of our debt series, 2018, I believe. And so PFM has presented us with some information that there might be some savings opportunity on a bond refinancing. And so we wanted to discuss that with the board here this evening. So.
Great. Well, it's good to see everybody again. As Greg mentioned, we keep track of obviously your debt from time to time. And some things have changed in the market. In terms of how what we call the yield curve has been shaping up. If you go to the first page of my handout, on the top, this is what's called the yield curve. You've probably seen this from me in the past, where we have short-term rates on the left, long-term rates on the right. I think for a long period of time, what you would see if you look at the gray bars, just so you know, are the high and the lows since 1993. The red line is the average, and the blue line is where we are today. What I think you would have seen a year or two ago is I think you would have seen on the left the blue line being higher than the red line, and on the right the blue line being lower than the red line. That's changed a little bit, and that plays into a little bit of our strategy and what we want to talk to you tonight about. Page number 3 is a snapshot of all your existing debt from the financing plan that you went through. So I forget when we started that, right? But it was quite a process, and we're sitting in a beautiful building because of it. And this lists all your outstanding debt. The one that I'll bring to your attention is in column 3 on the top, and then column 15 on the bottom. Okay, that was a 2018 bond issue. The reason the numbers on the top half are higher annually than the ones than they are on the lower is because you qualified for some plan con on for those projects. So I know you had a good strategy there, and got a lot of that money that
5 projects, I believe.
Yeah, it's not really coming to fruition for too many people doing projects today. But in any event, if you look towards the bottom of column 15, you'll notice those percentages. That's a plan con thing. But then you'll also notice what's called the call date. That's the date at which the school district has the first date at which the school district has the option to refinance or prepay without a penalty. So that's coming up in November. Here we are in the end of August. So that grabbed our attention. I asked Vincent and Melissa, I promise I didn't run any numbers, Vincent and Melissa, to see if we could do something with your call date coming up to save you some money. So if we go to the next page, page number 4, this is the breakout of the payment schedule. And actually something that probably Greg and Bobby keep on their desks and say, okay, I know you sent me a summary, but when are my payments due? What's principal? What's interest? And in column 3, what are the coupon rates that were locked in on those bonds 7 years ago? You've noticed that we've boxed the ones on the top. Okay? When you refinance a bond, you don't have to refinance the whole thing. You can refinance portions. So when we looked at refinancing it all, it didn't save you any money. But if we said, okay, then let's take the bonds inside 10 years, and that's what it's boxed around. The bonds will mature between now and May of 2035, and let's refinance those and see if we can save any money. Let's take a look at that. So what we did was we ran some calculations, said, okay, if we just refinance those boxed bonds, pay off the principal, there's a little bit of accrued interest that's involved there too. So we figured, okay, we need $9.7 or so million in new bonds to pay off those boxed bonds. So then we ran a schedule and said, okay, how do we raise the money, and what do the interest rates look like today in comparison to what those ones are before, and see if we kept the term the same on the boxed bonds, we're not stretching them out or anything like that, keeping the same maturities. Basically, we ran numbers in column 4. Those are the yields. The way that bonds price, you may remember, they have coupon rates and they have prices. But we're really focused on column 4. And if you were to go flip back and forth on those early bonds and see how 4 compares to the prior bonds, you notice that these interest rates are lower, just because of the shape of the yield. So if we did a bond, issued enough to pay off the bonds, pay some closing costs as well. If you look at column 11, right now there's about $244,000 of net savings. That's net of, because what happens if you reduce your payments on a bond that's getting plan con, that's less that the state needs to reimburse you on. Okay, so this is a win for them too, right? And we're also happy with the state right now.
Said another way, they get some savings too for our effort.
Hopefully that'll speed up
Yeah.
Anyway.
Are you on page 6 now?
What's that?
Are you on page
Yeah.
6 now?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So this is net of what we budgeted for financing costs. Obviously, we want to hear what the board's interested in doing this, then we'll start gathering all the, touch base with the professionals and so forth. See what it would cost to do this. But right now, based on where we're seeing rates and where we're seeing an estimated budget, we think you could net about $240,000 in this year's budget, because that's what it's showing today. As you know, in the past, we have historically been conservative with our rate assumptions. It's not as tight right now. Okay, we've been a little bit tighter. There's not as much cushion built in here. So we'll have to see if we start planning how things go, and just get ready to make sure that when it comes time to come to a board meeting close to that November meeting, we probably could do it in October. I think we put a timeline in here. See if we can save something like this for the district and just kind of get moving on it. I did include on page 7 what we estimate sources and uses. Some of the closing costs, just to give you an idea of what we budgeted. Obviously, we hope we can get them lower, but every dollar you don't have to pay in fees, you can pay, save money. But that would just give you an idea of what we're doing, just to be transparent. And then page number 8 would be the timeline. Okay, so we were talking about coming here tonight. If the board's interested, you could authorize us to all to start working on this at your September 9th meeting. We're getting prepared. We think you'd want to save money. But nonetheless, that would be the official authorization. That paragraph on top is a sample, what you might be able to use. And then we could get prepared, get the credit rating, things of that nature, and come back with an auction and get a bid done the morning of the 7th of October. And then I think that's a regular board meeting for you, so then you can see, okay, how this all turned out, and do we want to approve a resolution to approve the bond issue, which would be your action. I think many of you have been through this before, but that's kind of how this is. So happy to answer any questions. I just want to reiterate, we're substituting higher rates with lower rates to save money. We're not stretching payments out or anything.
How do you know the rates will be lower?
What's that?
How do you know the rates will be lower come October?
Actually, the rates that we assumed here are for an actual bond sale that we did like 2 weeks ago for another Pennsylvania school. When I saw the rates on that, that's when I said, you better take a look and see what might be available to you, because you got a bond that's refundable. In October, the rates could be higher, they could be lower. I will tell you this, for those of you that follow the Federal Reserve, there is talk about the Federal Reserve cutting rates in September. I think that, other people may have different opinions, that's priced in to some of the rates you're seeing here. They've already factored that in. I'm actually more worried if they don't raise rates, or if they don't reduce rates, will rates go further higher?
And I think that's something, to Ms. Morgan's point, something we would continue to look at, right? And so as we get into September, and then ultimately the sale is in October, how do we think the market's moving, and how does that compare to the $244,000 of projected savings? And so I think at any point, we'll have a little bit of a barometer of how likely is it that comes to fruition.
So those savings go to this year's budget,
This year's budget.
25-26 budget.
So you said your estimates are tighter now because of the current climate.
Mhm.
If our savings were projected to be half of that, you'd still be recommending this, right?
Normally I like to see at least what I call 2% savings.
Okay.
That's what I normally like to see.
And
In
why?
that case, that's like, we're refunding, I'd like to see you net about at least $190,000.
Okay,
That would be something that I would like to see, because these bonds are going to be out there for a little bit. If you only had 5 more years left on this bond, right, and it came to the call date and you could save 120,000 half, then you might want to proceed. But this is a bond issue that it's a little longer. We also are preserving the ability to refund the longer end later.
Brett,
That's all I'm saying.
like I know you said if we refinance all of them, there wouldn't be any savings for us. Why is there savings for us if we're just doing what was boxed in?
Because the longer rates are higher. So if I was to run the numbers for including the 2036, the 2042s, the interest rates on those are getting closer to the same or higher than what they are right now because of that yield curve shape that I mentioned before. So what we're trying to take advantage is of the low and short term rates. That's where the real gap has become. Because if you look at the interest rates on this, they're very similar whether you're short or long.
Is it as simple, Brad, as if I'm looking at page 2 with your charts, that the blue line is in the 2s
Yep.
below the 10-year, and our coupons right now are at 4s?
Yep.
So that's what you're saying, right? We're
Yep.
able to exchange the 4s for the 2s.
Right. Yeah, so to your point, Brian, so you can see the line, like you said, and then it gets to that gold bar, and then it starts going up higher to the 4s. So that's why there's no savings. So that's why we were trying to think creatively and say, hey, let's, rather than try and just refund everything, let's just take a piece of it.
I think from our perspective, because there's not it's not advantageous to refund the long end, those bonds that have the longer maturities. We can come back and do them later if the interest rates change and there's additional savings. And so we thought it best just to leave them kind of on the books, so to speak. And then if things change again in the next year or 2 or 3 years, then we'll be back to talk about those longer end bonds.
And we'll have some other bonds.
Yeah.
These call dates will be coming.
Right.
Yeah, so maybe more opportunities yet, yeah.
Yeah, the nice thing about the way you did your financing plan, if you go back to page 3, if you look at the call dates, see the call date for the 2017, we've already passed it. You can do it anytime thereafter, but the rates are still lower than what is out there right now. So we obviously wouldn't recommend you refinance. But as you move right on that page, on that row and column on page 3, you'll see all the different dates at which you have opportunities to refinance. So if rates come down, there's a good likelihood that Mechanicsburg area schools will be able to refinance and save some money.
But we're not extending the,
Should we have the administration move forward and present at our next meeting?
Great. Good to see everybody.
Thank
you.
Have a nice summer.
Thank you, sir.
I would say it, Brad.
thanks for coming, Vincent.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for all your work.
Yeah.
Have somebody keep me under control.
I know.
Did he do
You
all right?
always need somebody to babysit.
Did he do all right explaining that?
I think you did a pretty good job.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you, guys.
Move on to item 3.02, investment plan update. Mr. Longwell.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Rupp. The investment plan update is a function of policy, and so on an annual basis, normally in the fall, around August or September, we come back to the board to report back out on our investment plan and kind of our strategy there. Our goal remains to continue to use the same financial institutions that we have, whether that be our local institution, PNC, for check writing, or some of our external investment pools with Pliget or otherwise. We also hold CDs, certificates of deposit, and so we try to tier them in a way that we earn interest, but we also want to be careful about how much we lock up in CDs because we want to maintain our cash flow, especially with the state budget. We're kind of monitoring that as we go. Suffice it to say, in terms of our strategy, I would say it remains much the same as it has been in the prior years. In fact, I'd like to continue to point out and recognize Mrs. Ely and Mrs. Edwards. They do a phenomenal job. I think you've heard me mention that before around management of cash flow, but they really look at their institutions and transferring funds between them, looking at our certificates of deposit and how they tier the maturities. And so that uptick in interest that we've seen in the budget is certainly due in part to the interest rate environment we're seeing, but also due in part to their efforts as far as managing the money and investing it. So status quo really, but wanted to just come back to the board and report out on our annual check-in.
Any questions for Mr. Longo? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4, curriculum. Item 4.01, curriculum cycle overview. Dr. Bitts.
Yes, be excited to turn this over to Dr. Bowman and Mrs. Woodall in a moment, but as someone who has maybe some of the historical perspective on the curriculum cycle, I'll just share with you for a moment about that and then turn it over to them, try not to steal their thunder. Curriculum cycle is something that most school districts have in place, and it's one that we had in place for a long time. It's the idea, as they'll explain, that you're focusing your resources on certain subject areas and certain departments at certain times. So you're not focusing on every content area all the time on personnel and resources on making sure that things are still aligned with any new standards that have come out from the state or any other changes that you want to make to a course, but you're really able to focus your resources on this particular area. As a district, we had a cycle for a while. We came to a place then as a district where we started to invest in some time with some amazing resources, namely Jay McTighe and others, to be able to help us really transform our curriculum overall. And a lot of people invested a lot of amazing time and work into all of our curricular areas. Through that season, we kind of ended up tripping into a place where we just kind of did every curricular area all the time. And it was important during that season with having the resources of Jay McTighe and others speaking into the work that we were doing. But we're back at a place, and this is why we put it as part of our comprehensive plan, where we said we really need to get a cycle again where we can really focus on particular areas and allow our curriculum office to really be able to divert resources to specific areas at specific times. So just with a little bit of that historical background, this is kind of the rebirth of the curriculum cycle, if you will. And we'll let Dr. Bowman and Mrs. Woodall take you through some of our goals with that this year.
Thanks, Dr. Bitts. As Dr. Bitts said, it was kind of an early charge for me joining the district to really look at the curriculum cycle as part of our comprehensive plan, and jumped on board with a fantastic curriculum team. Mrs. Woodall, who's with me tonight, but also Mrs. Brumbaugh, Mrs. Bachman. We took it was a full year process. It really was. As a 4-person team, but also involving cabinet for feedback, and also the A team as well, and putting different iterations in front of them, and really working through what is a pretty big monstrosity when you look at it as a whole. We're kind of going to give you that brief overview tonight, but we'll get started here. Just a couple of things that we're going to cover with you tonight. The curriculum cycle overall, kind of what that 5-year process looks like and what it entails. And then some things that specifically this year are going to be a focus at the elementary level and the secondary level. Dr. Bitts, without knowing, had put a little plug in there for Jay McTighe. If you haven't, it's a great quote. Too often, curriculum has been viewed as a series of content topics, skills, which inherently suggest a coverage mentality. We need to focus the curriculum around big ideas that are most worth understanding and most necessary for transfer. And that word transfer you're going to hear about in a little bit in the next slide, but it's a concept that I would argue many districts don't adhere to, that puts us in maybe a different echelon, and really has paid dividends over the years in our work overall with curriculum development.
Dr. Bowman, can you make sure to expound on that through your rest of your presentation?
Sure.
I'm interested in
Yep.
how we compare.
Yep.
Please.
So as we move along here, The big question is why. We always have to answer why. And there's some notes up there that I beg you to review. As we do that, I'm going to actually channel Mrs. Brumbaugh, who shared a great idea with me that I'm going to now share with you. Curriculum, the word curriculum, comes from the Latin, a course to be run. As a district, we create this path for our students through each and every course that we create and submit for approval through you. We think our path is unique, so to elaborate a little bit further, in many ways, but one way is because we articulate transfer goals for each and every course, each and every grade level. Those transfer goals truly create an umbrella, an overarching idea of what we want students to experience from K to 12. So it's not, here's first grade standards, here's second grade standards, here's 10th grade standards, here's our transfer standards that start in kindergarten and go all the way through until the time that they graduate. And you'll see those transfer goals are interwoven within the curriculum throughout. That also includes standards, mind you. We do still adhere to the standards. I don't want you to think that we don't. That is something that is consistently incorporated as well. But those transfer goals are one of those things that I would say kind of put us maybe above, up the ante, if you will, so to speak, in comparison to other districts.
And do those transfer goals appear when we approve new curriculum? I think I've
Yes.
seen that.
Yeah, it is part of our documentation. Something also that we've included as we continue to work, Dr. Lebo, in putting it into the digital platform EduPlanet 21, that'll be clear for people to see that transparency of those transfer goals.
I'll give you a quick reminder of one that you might remember. Music. We want students to be artful, beatful, tuneful, no matter what grade they're in. And then obviously there's specific standards and skills and understandings that each grade is going for, while that overarching umbrella being what we want students to be in the big picture.
Yeah, so what we look at is we definitely still look at the no's and do's. So those are your standards. We're looking at that. You need to have no's and do's to build a foundation, but our curriculum goes above and beyond just the standards to really get to that transfer level so students can apply their learning to new and different situations.
And the word transfer inherently aligns with other terms that we would talk about, where synthesis and application. So in education, as you're talking about, okay, we learned the standard, we learned the skill, the content. How can you now apply that in maybe a new or different context? There is the synthesis, there is the application. That's inherently built into the term transfer. Again, the cycle, we kind of had one, then we didn't, and we're now getting back to it. But why is it important? I really think the quote there, again by Jay McTighe, summarizes in a great way why it's important. And the second and third word are really important, of modern education. So as education continues to evolve, we need to prepare our students to be able to apply learning. So we're creating students for jobs that do not yet exist, or jobs that they may be creating on their own that they don't know exist yet. And there inherently, I think, is how education has evolved, most importantly, at least in my time in education, drastically different from when I even graduated high school until now. So I think that those terms are extremely important, and that they apply, again, to not only the known, but then in the future, the unknown. So quite important there. The goals, in particular, 3 kind of simple bullets, but I wanted to point out that those are actually derived from the principles of curriculum development that we also use in the district. All right, so maybe a little more simplistic than what we've created in our principles, but really we want to evolve and grow from where we are now. We want to ensure that we are assessing all those learning goals, all those transfer goals. How are we assessing our students' growth, and how are we supporting that? And then how do we make sure that our curriculum reflects now? And that's why, again, there's a cycle in place that builds over a 5-year period. So we're not trying to do every content area every year. That 5-year window gives us a little bit of time for analysis, for work, for growth, and then we can revisit that after the 5-year cycle is completed. And we'll show you here in a minute kind of what that looks like over the next 10 years, actually. All right. So this just really kind of, in a visual form, maps out the 5 phases, which again, to remind you, each phase is a year in and of itself. So there's a year for research, visiting, and planning. For example, right now, our guinea pigs, if you will, this year are going to be our secondary math team. We're excited about that. The team has already planned some excellent activities for the first 2 days that we're going to have them for our staff-only days. I think it was Mrs. Woodall found, as a team, we found a couple books, one in particular that we found to be valuable that we're considering right now purchasing for each member of that math team that will serve as the curriculum committee. So a representation of that K-12 department that will help us make decisions when we look at research, visioning, and planning. And that second year, then, we're going to take what we've learned from all that research and the vision that we've created and the planning that we've done, and we're going to start to develop those resources. So in year 1, we're going to develop curriculum level maps that will be submitted to you. So you're going to kind of see what that proposal would be of those changes. And then we're going to finish that curriculum development in year 2, and again, put that in front of you at the unit level. Year 3 and year 4, then we give 2 years for implementation, which would include a lot of reflection and refinement and adjustment, looking at those assessments, those culminating activities that we're asking our students to do, the cornerstone activities. And again, are they truly assessing those transfer goals and reflecting what our students know, understand, and can do. And then year 5 is overall a in-depth analysis, looking at all different forms of assessment, revisiting that curriculum, looking at those cornerstone activities and the results, and doing an in-depth analysis and evaluation of the changes that we made, and did those changes have the result that we hoped that they would when we planned them in year 1.
Do you want us to ask questions now or at the end?
Feel free.
So, and maybe I missed this when you were saying it. You talked about math as the guinea pig this
Yep.
year, kind of secondary math as the guinea pig. So I'm assuming you're going to start with the curriculum they currently have in place. This isn't a rewrite like of everything. This is beginning with
Correct.
now. Okay.
Yeah, we start where they are currently, and we'll go from there.
That's
So
what this process
the
represents.
year 1, Julie, the research part of it is we really want to put in front of our folks what current research is saying about, in this case, math education. So we will have books, articles. There's some interesting concept out there, just like STEELS has now evolved in science. Some ideas with math and maybe some things that we could consider changing about our pedagogy in math and what that looks like.
And then as far as the time available to do this, always a challenge, is that something you look at pulling teachers out for? Or is it a combination of that and the professional development days in the summer? And all
Yeah,
those things?
it's a mix right now. As we adjusted the instructional calendar, truthfully, we kind of hoped we were going to have more time. But as you know, in education, we're always trying to cram a lot into a little. And so we're going to utilize the time that we have available on staff-only days. I think right now we have at least 2, if not 3 days designated.
We have, for staff-only days for math, there's 1 day for staff only, but we planned out half days for the initial curriculum committee, which we'll get into in a second, like what that looks like. But we're trying to not take teachers out of the classroom often, but enough for them to be able to provide some valuable input and grow their own learning as well, without saying, here's a bunch of things for you to do outside, but let's try to do this together as a team.
And throughout those different opportunities, creating ways for that information to be couriered to the department. So that nucleus, that curriculum team, will relay information, gather feedback, bring it back, and we'll continue that process then throughout. So those voices are still heard. Just they may not be sitting at the table as a member of the curriculum team, but they're going to understand what's going on. Similar to what was just done with CKLA and the pilot group and that committee, very similar format.
Other than that won't be a product that you're looking at.
Correct.
So, just check.
My question is,
for these 5 years, are they teaching the current curriculum, or is that gonna be changing in, year 3 and 4 up there? Like,
Correct, so
So
they,
the-
during years 1 and 2, the curriculum as it exists would continue. What we're hoping then in years 3 and 4, that, again, starting where we were at, what changes might we need to make? It's not a wholesale, we're just wiped it out, and 2 years later, we're starting something new and fresh. We're looking at what currently exists, what tweaks might need to be made, and that's what we're doing in years 1 and 2. And then 3 and 4, we're actually implementing those suggested changes and evaluating and reflecting upon those changes to see if they have the desired impact.
Some of that could be gradual across those 2 years too. You look at what Elmwood 4th and 5th grade teachers did with their literacy and social studies integration. Last year, they implemented just half of the new units while they continued to finish writing the last units. So now this year, they're implementing the whole thing. So there's opportunity to gradually implement too.
'Cause I just don't want, I visualize that you go through all this work and then, it takes 2 years to kind of like undo it all and then start all over again every like 2-3 years here, and it just seems like, I can see gradually improving on something, but I'm just trying to get in my head, you're not like throwing away the first 2 years and starting all over again on the 3rd year with something totally different. Okay.
I
Yeah.
agree.
I mean,
It does
unless
sound
there's
like a lot
some
of-
super drastic change in everything, so I will say with like STEELS, that's the new science standards. That was a large change from the standards that they had in 2004 when I graduated from college. So that is a more drastic overhaul, just because the standards with the 3 dimensions really impacts how we look at and teach science. So that curriculum is more of an overhaul than some others, especially when there are no standards changes. But when PDE does come out with drastic standards changes, there may be some more drastic curriculum changes with that.
The health of P is one of those that's on our radar. There's supposedly some new standards that are going to be released here in the near future. Actually, they were supposed to be released.
They're supposed
This
to
year or
be
next
released in
year.
September.
And
We'll see if
that-
that actually happens.
Yeah, that hasn't happened. So that actually, we incorporated that though into the cycle. Any more questions before we go next slide?
Yeah, that's a good point. So if let's say a standard, is coming out in 2 years, you would probably delay this process until that standard comes out, and then you could evaluate it. So.
Yes, again, depending on where it falls within the cycle, I think we kind of wait to evaluate. We can always adjust the cycle, and you'll see within the first 5 years how he manage things, and then kind of in the next 5, what we call the permanent cycle, and how that would look. I think we kind of have to see how that falls, and maybe look at possible implications, but again, not throw the baby out with the bathwater just because the state says there's, this, and STEELS isn't, they didn't just come out with that and then the next day, schools had adjusted, and so that kind of change is incremental over time anyway. All right. This is Little.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, sorry, yeah, that was still me, not, anyway, both of us, but first 5 years, this was fun. This was truly a puzzle for us to put together. So you'll see the phases or the years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we have each of those years outlined and the different departments and what phase they will be in. Because of where we are currently, even like we said, we're working with math secondary right now. The elementary math program, with where it's at with everyday math, we don't feel the need right now to focus our energy on that. Whereas we feel that we need more of a focus in the secondary area. So for those purposes, if you're looking at some of those splits, that's why. Because they currently are in different stages of curriculum development, if you will. And so we tried to honor that as much as we could. And then over these 5 years, you'll see we start to merge certain groups to get what you'll see in the permanent cycle in the following 5 years. So some of those departments are actually going to kind of live in a holding pattern, if you will, in year 4, in phase 4, which is the second year of implementation. So they're just implementing the current curriculum and they're engaging in that reflection and analysis. and are there little tweaks and such that we can make within the years without making any drastic changes that we need to put, even in front of the board, if you will. So some of those departments are going to, because they're a little more solid with their curriculum in the work that they've done over the last few years, they're going to they're going to live in that world. They're not going to actually rotate through. But if you follow Math 6 to 12, you're going to see that they're going to rotate through phase 1, phase 2, and then phase 3. And then we're going to actually join in year 4. We're going to bring the elementary up with them into that implementation. And then in year 5, do a comprehensive analysis of the K-12 curriculum at that point, so that in year 6, which would be year 1 again for them, we now have our math K-12 team, and they're going through the process as a K-12 department.
Yeah, so this is a huge jigsaw puzzle. We started just like we do with curriculum with the end in mind. So we actually started with the permanent cycle and then looked at that and
So
said like,
if this
okay,
gives you a
this
better
is where we
idea.
want to be.
Yeah,
This is where we're currently at.
this is where
How
we
do
started.
make them align?
So is the goal to eventually get all the curriculum caught up in the K through 12?
Yeah.
So it's not split?
Yes.
So that's why you're staggering them so that they can, and the holding pattern to catch up or something? So
Yes.
that-
So here's the permanent cycle here, and you can see where we do have K-12 as a department. For example, family consumer science, we don't have that at the elementary level, so that stays at a 6 to 12 level. However, if you look up here, everything that we do have that is a K-12 level, in the permanent cycle, we have everybody caught up, so we can look at it at K-12. Now, if we talk about math this year specifically, we're looking at a 6-12 with the curriculum committee. However, we do have representatives from the elementary, because if there are any changes, even though we're not looking at changing elementary at this current moment in time, they have their hands full with CKLA and then with science coming up soon, not soon, but in the future. We're not looking at changing math right now. We've had that as a focus for the past 2 years. We still need their input as we're going through and we're talking and designing, because the reality is it is a K-12 system. So even though we're not focusing on K-5 mathematics right now, there's still members that are part of the curriculum committee that's going to be looking at that planning and visioning, so they have their voices heard as part of that as well.
You'll also note strategically here, we did really try to purposely plan out that we have no more than one of the core subject areas in any given year. So again, focusing our energies, those are going to be our biggest departments in the district, right? All of your math teachers, all of your English teachers, whereas some of our elective departments are going to be smaller in number. So you'll see we actually combine those departments, art, BCIT, FCS, and music. And then science with the Steele standards and what we're doing with STEAM or STEM, you can see we group science with library and tech ed because they're all going to be within that STEM pathway. Similarly, language arts with world language. So we kept our languages together. And then it's not a natural marriage, but that's where health and PE fell with social studies. So that just, again, to try to balance out the distribution of our efforts, that's where we landed with a permanent cycle. So we really can focus our efforts in each of those phases very strategically. So just to kind of revisit, again, to answer you, Tracy, yes, that's why we have the splits, but you'll see we've worked by the end of those 5 years to get it to the point where when we get to year 6, we fall right into the line with that permanent cycle.
So I'll ask just something jumps out at me. You have science 4-5 unit level in 25-26, then you had it in 26-27 in 3, and then it disappears in implementation 2. And then it pops back up in, it's the 4-5, the 4 through 12.
Yeah, down in 5. So yes, the way we map that out to get them together again, with some of the work they've already done, but the work that's planned for Steele's for this year, for next year, unfortunately, they'll fall into kind of 1 year, if you will, of implementation of changes, and then we're looking at that evaluation. But that's where, Jason, I go back to you, the flexibility there, especially within this cycle, we may call an audible and say, we're gonna give them that second year of implementation, even though they're slotted for year 5. But as we're doing that, again, we're reflecting and evaluating anyway, so we may just keep them in phase 4 and then just jump them back up to phase 1 if need be.
No, but I see what Mr. Bradley is saying, though. There's actually a typo there where science for 26, 27, for 4-5, we have, it never matriculated down to the implement stage 2 or phase 2 where it should be in phase 4. Yeah,
Or just combine them down.
yeah.
Yeah, we did 412 in the following year,
Oh,
in
okay,
phase
wait, never
5.
mind, I see it, yeah, okay.
It makes sense.
I see it.
So, okay.
We had them highlighted
We're-
on another thing,
we're
so we
there,
can
right?
keep track of all of
Okay.
them.
Boom, boom, then
Yep,
disappeared.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, so that's, again, this is, talk about a jigsaw puzzle, but based on where everybody was, this probably took us the most. Like, that's why we did the end in mind first and said, okay, if that's where we want to be in 6 years, how do we make this work? And this is the way we mapped it out, but inherently, we have to build in some flexibility and responsiveness. And so we may adjust along the way, but we're hoping that at least providing this structure, we're able to get to that point where we're in a place where we're very strategic in in that permanent cycle.
This looks harder than writing curriculum. This chart.
This was a tough jigsaw
It was,
puzzle.
yeah, it was, again, I wouldn't have wanted to do it without anybody else, though. The team was fantastic.
How does this affect the workload for staff? Department chair question and regular non-department chair question.
I think that's honestly, Brian, one of the strengths of the cycle is it allows them very strategically to focus their efforts. Whereas right now, math is kind of divided. And so we just brought on Andrew Vreens as a new department chair, and he's looking at, okay, like, I know the secondary needs some work, but how do I also support the elementary? And once we get it to the point where they're together, it can be a K-12 approach, and we can have that consistent message. I also think they actually have a very clear view with this of what they'll be focusing on each of those years. So it's very targeted.
Would it be fair to say that, I guess, building what you just said, like before this, you may still have had that much work, you just didn't know what you were doing?
Yeah, they kind of, the way they've expressed it, in the short time I've been here, I think this actually was pretty well received, and the feedback they gave us is it was like drinking out of a fire hose. And that's the way they kind of felt every year, because there was so much to try to do. Where do we start? How do we begin? How do I make sure that we divide and conquer and cover everything that needs to be done? They can at least see the method of the madness over the next 5 years to get us to a point where we can finally then be consistent and take that team approach.
And
To
then-
some degree, said in another way, in the last 8 years, 10 years, they've been doing a little bit of all 5 phases every year. Looking at curriculum, then looking at the unit level, obviously implementing along the way, but also trying to monitor, and it has not been as clear as what we once had, and they're able to hopefully get back to it.
The challenge is for the primary at the K-3 where the teachers are teaching all core subject areas, science, math, social studies, and ELA. So what we talked about with them is they're going to have sectors of teachers that are the teacher leaders for that department. So you'll still have your grade level coordinator, but we'll have 4 or 5 people who will be working on the science curriculum. So when it's the science time, they're the ones that are going to be speaking into the science curriculum. Obviously still going back to their grade levels and communicating and receiving feedback, but they're going to be the core group for science development. Then for math, you'll have a core group for that math development. That way it's not all the teachers all the time, which is currently the system that they are living in, is they're all working on math all the time. They're all working on writing ELA all the time. They're all working on writing science all the time. So it will actually disperse that workload from the elementary.
That kind of brings me to my question. What's the research phase of the development process look like? Who's responsible? How does that start? Where are they looking?
So right now, it really is the curriculum team. So we went out this summer and we are growing our knowledge of just mathematical practices and what is the current research showing for the teaching of mathematics. So joined the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, been reading up on a bunch of their literature and books that they've published recently, listening to webinars from NCTM,
Right.
looking at, career development. Where are the careers really facing? What, like when we're talking about mathematics careers, what are the skills that they're looking at? So that's really, the four of us in the curriculum office are growing our knowledge right now with that, but then we're going to grow the curriculum team's knowledge. So the teachers and administrators that are on that phase one, we're going to be growing their knowledge that we've done.
Exactly.
We've done some preliminary research to find out, okay, what's good to put in front of them and,
I see.
what are we not going to necessarily say, we don't need them to read everything that we read this
Right,
summer.
exactly. And that's my question. When do the department chairs get involved,
Yeah.
the program coordinators?
All right, so now, moving on, we just have the last two slides here. This is what I was gonna kind of outline for you this year in particular, the elementary focus and the secondary focus.
So again, the jigsaw puzzle that we had up there for the first year of implementation of the curriculum cycle, I really wanted to pull out two phases that we're looking at the elementary level. So phase two, we're looking at the development of the STEELS science units at the 4th and 5th grade level. So in October, after we go through our ICC, we'll be bringing through the K-12 curriculum level maps that we worked all of last year and a lot of this summer on, and there's a lot of maps. There's over 100 maps that we'll be bringing you guys for the curriculum level for science. But we are working on the 4th and 5th grade unit development for science this year, utilizing those curriculum level maps. Aligned to STEELS and NGSS, we're going to be bringing training in, the same professional learning that the secondary science teachers have had. We're going to be bringing them in for the 4th and 5th grade math and science teachers. So again, we can have that continuous sequence of our 4th and 5th grade science will look similar to our 6th through 12th. Then next year, we'll be doing very similar with K to 3. So again, to eventually get to that K-12 scoping. But for this year, our focus is 4th and 5th grade unit development. And then also the K-5 health integration. So if you remember back to Fine and Applied Arts last year, K-5 health actually has 2 years of unit development when we look at the curriculum cycle. So they're in phase 2 this year, but they're also in phase 2 next year. Just because what we're looking at with that integration of health into the physical education time, with CKLA, there's a lot of content that we've brought through that's health-based content with like anatomy. If you can remember, Heather Snyder was here presenting last year about the human body systems and the maps that the students were drawing. So what we want to do is we want our health and physical education teachers to look at the content that the students are going to be getting as part of their English language arts and seeing how does that integrate in with what it is that they currently teach. How can they be more thoughtful and dig it deeper into the health topics rather than looking at the cursory overview level. Students are going to come in with that background knowledge, so how can they dig deeper at that K-5 level? So this year is really going to be spent looking at what topics are being taught through CKLA so they can dig deeper, and then next year they'll still be in phase 2, but they'll be doing that integration of health into physical education there. So that's our focus, and then our kindergarten art, again, with Fine and Applied Arts, if you remember, they're going next year from 1 day per cycle in kindergarten to 2 days per cycle in kindergarten. So again, that unit development for kindergarten art. So that's our focus right now for phase 2 for this year. And then phase 3, which is the implementation phase. So we have CKLA implementation going on to K to 3, so that is a very large implementation. But our 4th and 5th grade social studies and ELA teachers, if you recall last year, they developed their units for English language arts with social studies embedded into it to really grow the historical thinking skills for our students. They piloted 1 unit last year, so that's what Dr. Bitts was talking about, where sometimes it can be a blended integration. They piloted 1 unit last year. This year they're going full blown into it, so they've done an amazing job. I'm so excited to see what that full implementation is going to look like. And then also our kindergarten and 3rd grade library, Last year, they did some unit development as it was guaranteed now this year that kindergarten library was gonna be once per cycle and third grade library was going to be 2 times per cycle to do some more of that STEM integration. So they are in year 1 of implementation for their curriculum as well. So those are the main areas of focus for elementary.
Kindergarten library will actually have the librarian teaching this class?
Yes, they have. We hired that librarian last year for that 4th librarian. And then for secondary, we have a lot going on there, but our main thing is phase 1 of mathematics. So as Dr. Baumann said, they're going to be our guinea pig at that secondary level. So we have phase 1 mapped out of the different activities that we want to do. Really what we're using that math to map out that will be the foundation for phase 1 next year and phase 1 the year after that. So we can repeat our cycle over and over and repeat the activities that we're doing with each of the subsequent groups after that phase 1. Obviously, bless you. Obviously, with new research, new books, or when we do ELA, I'm not going to have them read Reimagining Mathematics, but again, the process will be very, very similar. BCIT, FCS, and Tech Ed, they are in phase 2, so they're working on their curricular units this year. Tech Ed, that will be part of the science maps that we bring forth in October. BCIT and FCS, you guys looked at and improved those curricular level maps last year. And then I have phase 4/5 right now for social studies and ELA. They are in 2 different phases technically in the curriculum cycle, but really what we have them doing is we have them working with EduPlanet 21. So their curriculum was the curriculum that we said, this is a pretty strong curriculum specifically at the secondary level. So right now we have them as the guinea pigs in EduPlanet 21. So at the processes that they've gone through, so we started looking at assessments last year. When we started looking at assessments and aligning our assessments to our performance expectations or our standards or our transfer goals, we started to notice that there was some misalignment in the rubrics that we were using to grade and what we were saying the students were learning. So that actually created rubric analysis that they're going through right now. And I think a lot of secondary is actually doing that, but social studies and ELA, they're the key heads for that, and we figured that out as, again, we were guinea pigging through EduPlanet 21 last year. And we're like, oh, okay, here's an area that we can tweak and help make it better for us. As we move forward through the curriculum cycle, that's when we're going to be bringing in the other department areas into EduPlanet 21. So our science curriculum maps, science curriculum level maps, those are all in EduPlanet 21 now. As we go into the unit development, those units are going to be developed into EduPlanet 21. So again, we can start looking at the public-facing sector so people can easily see what it is that our goals are that we are teaching. But then it also allows for that communication internally for all of our stakeholders to be able to see internally who's teaching what when. They can start looking at that vertical articulation. And we can also do standards analysis to see, where are we teaching this know and do? How often are we teaching it? How often are we hitting these transfer goals? Are there certain transfer goals that are hit more often than others? And I can tell you from cursory glances, there are some that we really nail those, and there are others that we don't necessarily go on. But again, that's part of the monitoring in phase 5 too, where we can say, look, this is what we've noticed, and maybe this is where we can make some tweaks within our curriculum.
Do you expect EduPlanet to be available to the community?
Yes.
So not necessarily only parents or.
No, it will be a forward facing. There will be links to it on the website where, again, anybody can go and look at our goals that we cover.
How will we know if we're being successful or if this is just busy work?
I know that. How do you know? So, there are definitely, one of the things that we are looking at in that visioning process for phase 1 is we're putting out our benchmarks. So what are the benchmarks that we will know for our curriculum? So as part of the vision, this is what we want for math. How are we going to know when we've reached that vision? So we are going to put through the benchmarks of success that we'll be looking at. So the types of data that we'll be looking at for that. For example, student makeup of coursework. Who's taking, I know Dr. Bitts, you did last year, the civil rights data. Who are our students that are taking advanced placement math classes? And how do we grow that to make it look more like our student population instead of a certain group of our student population. So those are some of the things that we're looking at as we do our curriculum to know that we're being successful.
One of the benchmarks would be more students taking an AP class, I think.
Might be increased enrollment in it, as we look at the,
Not necessarily more students taking an AP class, I mean, maybe that would be a great thing, but looking at, does the percentage of students taking our AP classes align with our student body? Or is there some misalignment there? Ideally, we want to start to get where our students taking the AP courses mirrors what our student population is, so the percentages are very similar. So are we going to get there immediately? I mean, I would love to say yes, but probably not. But again, we're going to define, okay, if this is where we are in year 1, by year 5, this is what we want to be successful. Now we'll have to redo that again as we go through year 1 of visioning it again. But it's to look at the incremental growth and set our benchmarks and know this is what we're looking at to be successful.
To some degree, that's, I think a couple of sessions ago, you were looking at the demographics of those advanced placement classes, and so you want to see that be sort of in line with what the overall student population is. Making those classes successful.
some of it is like the changes that we're making, as we talk about, making it relevant for our kids. The change that we're making is, the relevancy to our students, that why. When they sit in the classroom, and it was earlier in the presentation, why do I need to take this? How does this impact me? How does this impact my future? We can get better at being articulate and communicating that to our students so they see the relevance in the coursework. The better we get at that, hopefully the more inclined they're going to be to take different courses that also tie in with, as we're working with careers and pathways, as our upper level students are looking at, where do my interests lie? Well, how does that align with, what courses align with maybe where those interests lie? And hopefully they can start to see the relevancy of the coursework within our curriculum.
It seems those transfer goals then are used in the catalog, so to speak, to say this is why you want to take this class, and it kind of answers the age-old question, how am I going to use this? And if you see like this is the transfer goal you're going to be learning in this class, it might get some more uptake.
And part of that as well is we put out a student survey last year to our secondary math students to ask them, what do you find meaningful that's currently going on in your classes? So, we want to grow students. Like, if we have this percentage of students right now that say, I found relevance within my class, we want to grow that percentage, because I can tell you it's not 100% of the students right now that find relevance in their math class. But we want to grow that percentage. So that's data that we're looking at as part of this year 1 visioning. And we're going to set the benchmark. Okay, as we go through with our curriculum, when we're planning our curriculum, what are we going to see that's going to say that we're growing the relevancy for students, where they're going to see it? How are we explicitly bringing out relevant situations for our students?
I feel like I don't want to pick on the one example one you had, but like the idea of AP as a goal, for instance, is a affluent college-bound kid goal or family goal, and that doesn't apply to all of the students in our student body, right? So I wonder, and even the idea of wanting to take an elective version of math is like not necessarily where we want all students to be, right? Like I would say I'd rather have students getting A's in the core classes that have the most relevancy to normal life than being able to do AP Calc 2, where you don't actually, the transfer goals are a lot harder to visualize in real life than, I don't know, accounting or algebra or something else.
I see what you're saying there. Please do not take it as I believe every kid should be taking AP classes. I think students should be taking classes that are of interest to what their future career paths are. However, I do think that we want our student population in our AP courses to be reflective of our student population overall and not have a lopsided representation.
I guess what I'm saying is I think the goals are challenging to come up with on all of these, and so that's something I'd like to hear as they come into focus for all of them. I would be interesting, not from a need to match them up with our other goals, but I think our goals are you know, the district goals and pointing at our goals, but they are, you know, much broader and have more applicability. I wonder, back to the idea of why do we offer French? Like, it's the same idea. Like, if we're gonna go through the exercise of all world languages, like there has to be some, you know, I understand why you do that, but there are, you know, I think the idea of it for its own sake can't be the only goal in a sense. So I just leave you with that. I feel like there's a lot to think about with how do we, what the next level is, and then once you do it, what do we, and then you go back to your research phase. We gotta hit another bar above that. You know, it's.
I think it's really
big
hard
challenge.
in education to measure, I mean, I think that's part of what you're saying. It's hard to measure, have goals that you can measure in education for so many reasons. Certainly you can have some, certainly in some subject areas, I think it's easier than others. But what I feel like in our district was, and I believe still is, I believe it comes down to actually when you get all the way to the classroom and you see teachers interacting with kids, and it's that one-on-one relationship that they have with the kids, and I know what you need and I know what you need, and I'm helping you reach that goal and this goal. Again, difficult to measure. You know, that I feel like I rely upon administration to be sure that those kinds of relationships are happening and encouraging kids, and the kids that do want to pursue French or that culture or whatever, you know, I hope that the administration would come back to us and say, you know what, we're not seeing this, so we need to take that out, and I rely on them to hopefully tell us that. So
I agree with
as
that.
much as I like to have goals, I am very goal oriented, there's no doubt about that. It's so hard to put into any kind of specific for kids, especially then, you have kids that are coming at all different times into our system, and to measure this number versus that number, just it's so hard.
I think that the delivery and the idea of tweaking the delivery of curriculum and all that is really interesting, and I like the idea of constantly getting better at. There's a new way to teach math, or we're tweaking how we do this, and the elementary teachers have discussed how like they did an exercise in getting better at math and in instructing, and they were really happy with it, right? And I hear all that part. I just think I mean, Julie, there's some really easy ways to measure, which are their grades, right? And so like there's some of that and Dr. Bitts and I was asking you this last night because I wasn't sure where we're going with this discussion, but like, could we improve on our test results in some place, you know, and point to those and say, we're doing a good job, instead of being like, you know, they are what they are, but we do a really good job. Like, we do a really good job, and here's a one measure of that. And maybe that's, it is.
Mr. Seneca, if I may, what you're talking about, really, we hope and plan to involve and integrate into phase 1 and phase 5. Just even looking at, again, the data we have available. We've talked about, you know, researching data partners and what those companies may or may not be able to provide us, and how can it help with this part of the journey and others as we research MTSS and the implementation of that more fully in the district. Again, that's going to be data pieces that include academic results. Course enrollment, gradebook audits, assessment, classroom assessment. I mean, I would argue from my standpoint at the academic house, I would rather us focus most of our efforts on analysis of classroom assessment data. Like that's, when you're talking about now you're talking about the learned curriculum, right? You have the planned written curriculum, you have the taught curriculum, and then you're actually looking at what was learned through all of that. And that is where the rubber meets the road for us. So the better we can get at curating that data and interpreting that data and using that to inform whether it's pedagogical changes, whether it's curriculum development changes, whether it's professional learning needs for our teachers, like that can help inform that. And that's part of what we hope and have planned to incorporate within that curriculum cycle.
I do appreciate all this. I know it makes sense as we're growing as a district and we're adding process to this, and it seems like a lot of work into that. And I feel it's sort of like changing the wheels on the car while the car is still moving, and that seems to be, we have a plan for how to do that. So I think that's very
Questions, comments?
I was just thinking, as a teacher, autonomy is important in the classroom, as well as having standardized curriculum to follow. And I think having a little room for teacher autonomy in the model is really crucial. I think that teachers feel really professionally rewarded when they're respected in the classroom to kind of make their own decisions as well about what's valuable to be teaching or how to deliver the instruction. And so, is there a plan for, engaging, teachers and being autonomous and having some independence in the manner of delivery?
As we talked last year when we were here, the art of teaching, you must have the art of teaching. So you have the curriculum, but how you deliver that curriculum, that's the art of teaching. That's the creativity that comes to teaching. So, there is still that. Now we'll have professional development on, these are some pedagogical practices. It might be newer research. But again, it's that art of teaching that is really key to why we hire the best teachers here at the Canonsburg Area School District. I mean, they're amazing at what they do. And it's not because of what we're doing here. We're not saying you need to do this. It's we trust them as professionals to bring their art and their knowledge into it.
Yes.
In the end, the craft is creating that experience for the students within those courses. But we also need to remember that that's why we create the curriculum. So in the end, if I have teacher A for English 10 and teacher B and teacher C, I somehow have to be able to discern, here were our learning goals, our transfer goals, how did those kids fare no matter what teacher they had? And then we can look at that. And that's sometimes where, we've said, you kind of need to check your ego at the door sometimes too, because it may be, okay, those kids really rocked it with this activity or this unit, and then you're saying to that teacher, talk to me about how you did that. Why do you think that was successful? Sometimes it's just the mix of kids that they have in front of them.
Absolutely.
It really can be that simple, but the art of teaching still comes into play of how they facilitate those learning experiences within the structure of the curriculum.
Right. And, of course, student engagement, as Julie was saying, and teacher satisfaction with the curriculum is also crucial, as you well know.
That was also a survey that we gave out
Absolutely.
last spring as well to the math teachers, is what was their satisfaction,
That's what I like to
how
hear.
they perceived it.
So we have teacher survey data and student survey data built into the process as well that we will review with our team, and that will help inform in phase 1, and then in phase 5, it's again really looking at over those 4 years then what we implemented. Did it have the desired results that we planned?
Right.
Why or why not?
Yeah.
And maybe some of the unexpected results too, good or bad.
Yeah.
Like there's some great unexpected results that happened here. What were they?
Yeah.
Why? And that helps them, again, moving into the next cycle, that may help inform, are we ahead of the game? Are we on par? Are we best serving our kids?
Right, and that feedback loop is so crucial. I'm glad you mentioned that. Is there any feedback on the implementation? I don't want to derail this conversation, but on how effective block scheduling has been in terms of teacher satisfaction, student satisfaction? Has there been any kind of follow-up now that it's been a couple of years?
So I'll share, drawing back on our comprehensive plan goals now for the refreshed 3 years of the comprehensive plan. The feedback that we got through that planning process last year from all stakeholders really showed that there are some questions about aspects of the block schedule. Ultimately, I would say that in digging through all that data, reading every comment myself, I would say that a lot of people say the block schedule, but it's actually nuanced elements that we've added to a block schedule that are the bigger question marks. So we are at that place where it's time now, after a number of years, to be able to revisit and say, okay, so what is working about this and what isn't? And there are some things that I know Dr. Bowman and Mr. Reedy are working closely together this year on with a group of other folks to be able to refresh the schedule again. Do I see us getting away from a semester block? I'm not so sure, but I think there's some elements that should be changed, can be changed to improve what we currently have. So definitely more to come.
So when you say about the nuance, not necessarily the block.
Day 6.
That's
The
what I was gonna
IA.
ask specifically. I mean, I've heard that from several.
Day 6
Places.
being a rotation,
Yeah.
IE, which is at the end of the day. Some of the elements to, there are block schedules that have skinnies embedded so that there are opportunities still for a year-long course, even within a semester block schedule. Ours doesn't have that, so there really isn't any opportunity for a year-long course. So some of the challenges with, you have a fall class, but then you take an AP class in the spring, how does that marry up? So those are all things that, and thankfully, Dr. Bowman's got a wealth of experience of that from other districts.
I have a little bit in that avenue, yeah. And Mr. Reedy, I will, to just, I give him credit, like, he's already created some subcommittees to look at different things, one of which is the schedule. Mrs. Brumbaugh already worked with our instructional coaches, and already this year, at the start of the year, they started revisiting the use of instructional time, and have presented some really unique ways to look at that, and like even just like the idea of like even 4 quarters of a game, dividing that instructional period into 4 quarters, and how does that look like, and how do we plan with that in mind? Really effective, got some positive feedback. I had a high school teacher stop me in the hallway to actually really rave about that, and in general, just the feedback was that that's the one thing that continues to impress him about this district, even with years of experience in education. Every year he sometimes feels like a new teacher because he's learning things that make him rethink how he delivers his instruction and how he can get better for his kids. I don't know if there could be a better compliment, honestly, than that from a veteran teacher to say, I embrace it and I love it here because I'm constantly being challenged to think differently. So a compliment to Mrs. Brumbaugh and our instructional coaches that are already looking at those longer blocks of time and how our teachers can maybe attack them differently.
Yeah, following through, especially with, like you mentioned, the AP, making sure there's a review for those students who had a gap before the test. I think that review session, I think, will be crucial as well. So. Revisiting that.
Very good. Thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Article number 7, policy 7.01, first reading of revised board policy 008, table of organization. Dr. Pitts.
Yeah, we bring this forward many years, just with any updates, specifically with names, but also with some reorganization of responsibilities and titles and those kinds of things. This year, the major updates are on page 2 of the document attached, the district leadership, and then the student services page. District leadership, you can see that we are now have a cabinet that is 9 members strong. Great group of folks with different perspectives and a lot of expertise in their particular areas. So that page on district leadership is now everyone that sits on our weekly cabinet meetings. Then in the student services realm, you can see based on some of the changes we had in our last board meeting, we have split that into director of special ed and director of student services and 2 supervisors underneath both, and the delineation of responsibilities there. So those are the main changes, and we'll bring this forward next meeting and attach it to the policy itself, which doesn't change. We just attach a new version of the
Organization. Any questions for Dr. Pitts, table of organization? Seeing none, meeting is adjourned.